It's a huge, huge pleasure to welcome you all here today. We thank you to everyone who's come and giving us some of your attention on a Friday afternoon. What is Peace Photography is a panel that is bringing together four speakers to talk about their work with photography and communities in distinct peace and conflict settings, and to reflect on this question of what a photography of peace might consist of. We are planning to record this panel. So I'm not sure if recording's already started, but that's just to say so you all know that the panel is being recorded. My name is Dr. Tiffany Fairey. I'm a senior research fellow in the Department of War Studies at King's College in London. And it's my pleasure to be hosting and chairing this panel. For a number of years now, I have been working with partners around the world to undertake research to think about how we understand peace with and through images, and the question of what contribution that photography, and by photography I mean the images themselves, but also the process of making and sharing images, what contribution that photography might make to the transformation and prevention of conflict. We know plenty about war photography. War generates countless photos, which documents its horrors, devastation, and harms. And much war photography might even be named or called anti-war photography. But little thought has really been given to this idea of what a photography of peace might be. Peace photography as a photographic genre doesn't really exist in the public imagination. When it comes to peace, we have very few images. On the left, we have an image search for war, and you'll see that there are lots of many very specific photographs. But on the right, we have the same image search for peace. We don't seem to have images of peace. Where are our images of peace beyond abstract symbols, CND signs, doves, perhaps a handshake or a sunset? We have a very limited, abstracted, even passive visual vocabulary for peace. We don't have specific, tangible images that show us what the active work it takes to build peace, who's doing it, and what it involves. In short, we don't really know what peace looks like in visual terms. And this has serious consequences because, of course, images are potent political forces. They shape how we see ourselves, each other, and the world. They can work to entrench division and inflame conflict, or they can be used to foster cultures of dialogue, plural coexistence, and just and positive peace. Because images define what we can see and what we don't see, they work to frame the conditions for political possibility, and they drive political narratives. And when we understand peace and peace building as essentially multidimensional political processes, we can see how images directly shape the kinds of peace that are possible. So as conflicts, authoritarianism, polarization, all these things are on the rise at present. And so this question of peace has never been more urgent, more relevant, but also more contested. The fragility of peace has been thrown into sharp relief. Different groups are using the concept to drive very different kinds of politics, narratives, and agendas. Frank Moller, who's a visual peace scholar, argues that because there's so many different understandings of what peace might be, and the concept of peace itself is very abstract and co-optable, there'll be just as many different forms potentially of peace photography. Many people might talk about peace photography, but do it in very different ways. And I see this question of defining what peace photography might be as a form of provocation to help us think better and more critically about what peace means to us in the world. So against this backdrop, I've been working in multiple countries with practitioners and communities directly affected by conflict and violence to understand how they are using and harnessing photography for peace in their own very specific peace and conflict settings, to understand what different versions of peace photography might be from the perspective of people with lived experience of conflict and who are actively striving for peace. My focus isn't been on professional or international image producers, but on localized, community engaged and participatory forms of image making. by communities and practitioners who are using photography to heal, to build connection, agency, dialogue, to navigate difference, to have difficult conversations, to resist violence, make peace possible, and also to build, well, to assert the presence of peace, even in the midst of conflict and polarization, and also to inspire that peace is possible. What is clear from looking at all these different projects is the peace in peace photography isn't a given. It actually emerges from very intentional approaches and methods. What do these processes and methods involve? What opportunities do they bring? What ethical challenges and tensions do they hold? So 8 of these projects that feature in this imaging peace research feature in a large-scale exhibition that's currently produced by King's Culture, that's currently on display on the Strand. And these projects and 18 others have also contributed to our visual peace resource for practitioners, which is called Peace Photography, a Guide. And that's free to download from the Imaging Peace website and available in English, French, and Spanish versions. So today, now, it's my pleasure to get stuck into better understanding what peace photography might mean to 4 of the contributors to this guide and to this exhibition. While peace photography isn't established as a genre, the imaging peace research established that in practice and as a way of working with communities and supporting recovery from conflict and transformation of conflict, it is actually thriving. There are people doing incredible work in communities around the world, and we have a lot to learn from these practitioners to better understand what peace photography is and might be. And for many of these communities that our presenters are working with and that they're from themselves, peace isn't necessarily a day-to-day reality. Conflict, the legacies of harm and division continue and are actively shaping people's experience day to day. So in this sense, photography isn't being used to generate peace in the present, it's also anticipating a peace that might come. And so to imagine and realize peace as form as justice, resilience, healing, and connection. So we are welcoming today Tatjana Milovanović, who is Program Director of the Post-Conflict Research Center. We hope she's turning up. She's not here yet, but she will be, I'm sure. We've also got Yassim.
I'm here, by the way.
Oh, hello. Great, Tatjana. Sorry, I didn't see you on my screen.
No worries.
We've also got Yassim Abdumonab. He is a photographer for the Rohingyatographer Collective. We've got Brendan Bannon, who is a photographer and founder of the Odyssey project in the US. And we've got Jacques Nkinzingabo, who is a photographer and director of the Kigali Center for Photography. So let's jump right in with Tatjana. Are you happy to start? I'll just give a quick intro. Tatjana is she is the program director for the Post-Conflict Research Center. She holds like a whole bevy of masters and degrees in a range of subjects with transitional justice, human rights, and law from universities in Geneva, Sarajevo. In addition to her position as Programme Director of the Post-Conflict Research Centre, she's also Deputy Editor-in-Chief of their media platform, The Balkan Discourse, and she has over 14 years' worth of experience working with youth and civil society organisations in the challenging context of the Western Balkans. And she is a core part of the award-winning team at PCRC, the Post-Conflict Research Centre, who have been harnessing creative media and arts for peace building for many years now, and photography is a core part of their work to foster cultures of peace in the Western Balkans. And it's been my great pleasure to work with PCRC now for 7 or 8 years. So let me hand over to Tatjana. We're going to go speaker by speaker in turn. So if people have questions, please do put them in the chat, and there'll be questions for everyone's going to speak for about 8 minutes or so, and there'll be time for questions at the end. So many thanks, and over to you, Tatjana.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try sharing a little PowerPoint here. I'll start talking, and if really you cannot see it, let me know, but hopefully it should work. First of all, good afternoon, everybody. So sorry for being a little bit late. It was a Zoom mishap. Very happy to be here. As Tiffany said, I'll be speaking on behalf of Post-Conflict Research Center, or PCRC for short. We're based in Bosnia and Herzegovina, working in the country, but also across the Western Balkans. We're a women-led peace-building organization, so very happy in that way to be here as well. So for many years, basically ever since the center was founded in 2011, photography has been one of the most powerful tools for us, and one of the main tools in our methodology of doing peace building in the country. It's one that for us centers a lot participation, tries to reframe different narratives, tries to open ways of seeing the world. And coming from a context of Bosnia and Herzegovina, that I know we have quite a lot of listeners today. So in short, during 90s, between 992 and 995, my country went through a terrible war and genocide. That left about 200,000 people were killed, and over 2 million people were displaced. When you put it in a context of a country that at the time had about 4 million people, it affected a large number of our population. And so when we started doing this work, many things have already been tried, especially when it comes to things, sort of the dry ways of, we're just going to teach history, we're just going to teach facts, and people have to deal with it. And over time, we realized that that's not necessarily how it goes, and that people need a bit more to connect with such painful histories. And so one of the ways we did that was through photography. And through my short presentation, I'll try to kind of, I pulled up some of my most favorite photographs and photographers that we worked with. I myself am not one. I'm more of a practitioner, but which is why I made sure to credit all our colleagues. But for example, one of our first projects was Ordinary Heroes. It carries stories from Bosnia, Rwanda, Cambodia, and the Holocaust, and it focuses on stories of moral courage, meaning that it shifts this narrative of war events, where we're not just thinking about the tragedy of war, but also these very courageous individuals who during the war helped save somebody, who usually, in most cases, if not all, they didn't know before, was just a person in trouble. In Bosnia, those were usually people who were of different ethnic groups, so technically people who were at war. And all these people were courageous people that risk their lives to cross these lines, and put their lives on the line to save somebody, in most cases just because they thought that's the only right way to live life, right? And so using these narratives and photography, we try to bring out questions of, what maybe would I have done if I was in a similar situation? What if tomorrow, God forbid, I am in a similar situation? But also, what if today we are technically at peace, but we're still lacking this? We're still lacking this cooperation. We're lacking empathy. We are reluctant to help people on the street. We're reluctant to help our neighbors. So what is stopping us? And this sort of brings me to my first point in terms of what peace photography is for us, or should be, is that it needs to be accessible and participatory. Sorry. To nurture real peace values, photography needs to reach people where they are. For us in Bosnia, that meant going out on streets, setting up exhibitions in public squares, in parks, wherever people would gather and look and read and interact with the images. It meant very much because in Bosnia there's still this weird sense of, if it's something artistic, it tends to be in a museum and in a gallery, and for that you need a ticket and you need to dress up nicely. So in that way, we try to break that from the get-go and try to make it as accessible as possible, and also try to, as much as we can, and that's one of our projects right there on Roma minorities in Bosnia and the Roma community, is also try to make sure that the community is in the project from the get-go and throughout it. Like, in this specific program with Roma communities. They're there for every exhibition opening. We try to mark any important days for the community. Even one of the members of the community was actually a photographer in the exhibition itself. Additionally, I would say for me, one of the most meaningful projects we had, and I had to kind of mention it because it's a meaningful year as well, as this year we're commemorating 30 years since the Srebrenica genocide, has been this project called Memento, Fragments of Srebrenica Genocide, where we took well, we worked with victims and survivors, and those especially who have donated personal objects of their family members to the Srebrenica Memorial Center. We decided to focus on the object and on the person donating, and through that tell their story. And I mean, the project had about 20 personal testimonies, but due to the scale of the genocide, managed to commemorate around 120 people their lives through the exhibition. And in this way, especially for us working with survivors and victims, we definitely put a lot of highlight on doing this type of work in a responsible manner and done with care. When documenting the stories of victims and survivors, we must try to make sure we do not harm or do not do more harm. Obviously, re-traumatization is not something that we can guarantee it's not going to happen, but having access to psychosocial support, being able to guide the survivors through this process and engage them every step of the way is incredibly important, and making sure also that they know that they have agency over whatever is put up here, and trying to find ways to also bond with them so that they believe that what we're presenting is also going to be put in a correct historical context, that it's not going to be abused. And on another hand, for us as a peace building organization, it is also very important that the language we use in these exhibitions comes from a place of recognition for survivors, but also of a place of hope and peace, so that we're not using the more divisive language and basically further contributing to different ways of hate speech or divisions or any type of victim blaming and stuff like that. I think I'm running a little bit on time, but I'll try to keep myself short to not go over the 8 minutes. But in all this, one of our main priorities, and that is basically how we got connected with Tiffany and this lovely team at King's, we try to offer as many possibilities for young people to try themselves out in documentary photography, in gaining some of these new skills. We have a platform here, it's called Balkan Discourse, and actually the stories that are presented in London currently were all created and curated by the young people that go through our annual trainings, and these are those stories. The project is called Love Tales, and it again gives a different narrative of the war events and how they influence society today. As you can imagine, when I was given a little context to Bosnia, it over 2 million people who were displaced, and so many casualties had to basically rip the social fabric of the country apart. We used to be in Yugoslavia, which was a different type of a society with a lot of brotherhood and unity, which also meant there was a lot of, we call them mixed marriages, meaning that it didn't matter your perceived religion or ethnicity, especially in Bosnia, which tended to be a more mixed community. But then after the war, those numbers declined drastically. And so what our young people did is they went into their local communities and found examples of people in successful interethnic relationships, many of them who even survived the war, like this a couple in the upper corner, or new relationships like these bottom pictures. Try to talk to them also about their experiences of being in these types of relationships. How are they perceived by the community, and trying to, as much as we can, promote this type of coexistence, but also love, also very basic sort of the good emotions in people. and try to kind of get them thinking whether these types of relationships are valuable, as we do believe they are, and that more importantly, they can still live in this country even after all the war and genocide, unfortunately. And that would be me in very short. I will put in a few links in the chat as we go along with just some of these things that I talked about. But thank you very much for the space, and I look forward to any and all questions.
Many thanks, Tatjana. Right, next we're going to move straight on to Yassim, if you're there. Yassim Abdumonab. He's a Rohingya senior photographer, videographer, and educator who has lived in exile in Bangladesh since 2017. Apologies, Yassim, if I've said your name incorrectly. But he uses photography, writing, and community engagement to preserve Rohingya culture and raise awareness about statelessness. And his work has been featured in The Guardian, in Al Jazeera, and he's crucially here to talk about his work with the Rohingyatographer collective, where he is a mentor and senior advisor and a leading voice in the Rohingya cultural movement. So I will leave Yassim to tell us a bit more about Rohingyatographer. Over to you, Yassim.
Okay, hi, how are you? Hope all is well. Sorry, the connection here in my country will be a bit bad. So please let me know if you are not getting me or not. So I think Tiffany had some mistake on my name. My name is Yassim, not Yassim. Yassim.
Many apologies for that.
It's okay. I understand. I understand. Don't worry. So I'm. My real name is Muhammad Yassin, but most of the people know me as Yassin Abdumonab. So I use this name for social media handles, also my identity for my work. So I'm originally from Myanmar, Mongol northern side. In 2017, I had to flee my country due to the violence and conflict that happened in my country, and I had to flee. Sorry, are you seeing this? Okay, so I had to flee my country due to the violence and the conflict that happened, and there were so many, crimes committed against us. And then finally, more than 1 million Rohingya had to flee our homes. And now currently we are surviving in the world's largest refugee camp in Cox's Bazar, in Bangladesh. So I work as a, photographer and humanitarian worker. And also, I work as a journalist for international media outlets. So right now I am in the world largest refugee camp where I live with more than 1 million Rohingya refugees. There are men, women, children, everyone in my community. So I mostly work on documentary photography, so I can tell the stories of my people about our hardship, our challenges, our difficulties we face in every season here in the camp. So today my topic is about our Rohingyatographer. There is an organization that is name as Rohingyatographer. In this organization, so there are more than 35 photographers. So we have the founder, we have the curator, we have the editor, we have mentor, we have social media handles, observer. So among of us, our founder is Sahat, and our curator, our editor, his name is David Plazon. He is from Germany, and he is not living in Bangladesh. He is living in Germany. So Sahat is in Bangladesh refugee camp, and another one is Ethram Chain. He is living in the refugee camp with us, and then there is another one, Hairullah. There is another one, name is Anayat Khan, also including me. We are the team core member of the Rohingyatographer magazine. So every year we publish the magazine. Already we have published the issue 1, that is about the identity and about the elements, and then we have the issue 2, that is about our different elements about the crime situation like environment, disaster, this kind of thing. And our third issue is about food, Rohingya foods, Rohingya culture, how Rohingya preserve their own foods in the world largest refugee camp. So already we have published 3 magazines, and then you can check our magazines on our website. We have website, we have Instagram handles, we have Facebook handles, we have X handle. We are active on everywhere where we always update our activities, like we post our daily activities on our social media handles, so the world can stay connected with us. So today I am going to talk about our mission, about the Rohingyatographer mission. So Rohingyatographer is dedicated to empowering the Rohingya community through photography, providing a platform for self-representation and storytelling. Our mission is to foster global understanding and empathy for Rohingya crisis, preserving collective memory, advocate for human rights and dignity, and by empowering Rohingya individuals to document their own narratives. We aim to challenges perception, inspire change, and contribute to a world where art can act as a powerful catalyst for social justice. These are mainly our objective. We have a lot of objectives, but I am not, bringing all of them here with you because it will take a long time. That's why I am just making the summarize. So we enhance our creativity, like developing storytelling, content production skill amongst the team members, strengthening them as Rohingya photographer, as a Rohingya lead content creation platform, preserving cultural identity as well, engaging Rohingya youth in preserving our own identity, our history, our cultural heritage, and collective memory. We also facilitate education as well, like producing educational assets that can be utilized by Rohingya individuals engaged in teaching and learning within our own community. Also, we empower about the livelihood as well, like supporting practice-based learning, self-expression, skill development as livelihood and income support opportunities for talented Rohingya youth. Also, we do advocacy visibility, like using for our project access to raise visibility for the Rohingya community and support advocacy effort for our hope to return home. So actually, this is the brief I made just to make you understand what is the mission of Rohingyatographer. So let me add more details about our work. So we mostly collaborate. This Rohingya photographer magazine is the first magazine from the world largest refugee camp. This is the first magazine we all Rohingya photographer have published for the first time that is widely recognized by the by the world community. So I think I can now finish my presentation. I hope you got all of the details about the Rohingyatographer. Thank you.
Many thanks, Yassim, and I apologize for not pronouncing your name correctly. That was fascinating, and I really hope we get a chance to hear more about your work. I really urge everyone to have a look at the Rohingyatographer website. Their magazines are absolutely fantastic. So we'll move on now to Brendan Bannon. Brendan is a photographer himself and also founder of the Odyssey project. It's another one of the contributing projects for the Imaging Peace Research. Odyssey project is really a participatory therapeutic photography workshop with combat veterans in the US. But Brendan has a long history as a photography educator, running workshops with communities with HIV positive youth, working with refugees and cancer survivors worldwide, and through his initiative, The Most Important Picture. Beyond his own photography, which has been exhibited at the UN headquarters, the Museum of Modern Art, and featured in leading publications, he has also produced a jazz album. So a man of many talents, and I'm looking really forward to hearing a bit more about your work and Odyssey. Over to you, Brendan.
All right. Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you also, Ingrid, for all of your work bringing us together in the book and giving us an opportunity and platform to share work that we are all passionate about in a community and expanding the community. It's your project has been amazing. It's been a great honor to be part of it, and it's also been very exciting um, for my students who, in this case example, are combat veterans, to be a part of it. Um, I let's see. So a couple things that I thought about while preparing. One was 8 minutes is a very short period of time to describe 5 years of work on behalf of over 100 um, participant photographers. So what I did was try to narrow down a little bit the focus and share a handful of images and a handful of stories out of the 100 participants that have been in Odyssey starting in 2019. Um, People think of photography as a solitary practice, but the quest for meaning through photography, as they practiced it, was intimate and rooted in a community of peers. By using a camera to engage each other and the world around them, veterans shared the battles that continue long after their war has ended. They also reflected on their victories over circumstance. Um, One thing I learned working with veterans was the incredible complexity of their lived experience. This project, in a sense, started as a way of, um, let me see. Are you guys seeing this?
Yes, we are, Brendan.
Good. So this project started in a way of paying back a friend of mine who was a World War II veteran, piloted amphibious landing ships in the South Pacific during the war, and came back to the States and to a life that was defined by having to navigate the complex trauma of that experience. Joe Orfeo did that through painting, and when I hit a point in my life where I needed a roadmap forward to deal with depression and exhaustion as a caregiver to my mom who had multiple sclerosis, Joe was there as a model, as a instigator, as a support, and encouraged me to engage through photography as a way of kind of pulling myself back into the game of life. Joe spent the last few years of his life painting these pictures of the galaxy, and I always marveled that this lovely 85-year-old man was um, reflecting on the universe from this small pinpoint on a map not far from where I lived. Um, yeah, so those images for him were ways of finding peace with where he'd been, the things that happened to him, the things that he did, and the things that he witnessed and carried with him. And a way of, I think, in some ways, kind of transitioning spiritually. And one of the things I love in photography is the echoes that happen between different pictures, different people, different places. And this image was made by Sam Sacco, who was one of the veteran
Sorry,
art.
Brandon, I'm going to interrupt. Your image isn't changing. We're still on the first slide for some reason. We're not seeing the images that you're talking about.
Okay, I don't know why. Let me see. Uh, uh, uh.
You could try stopping sharing and
Yeah,
reshare, and maybe sometimes that we can see them then. I saw them then when it wasn't full screen.
all right. Let me just roll with
Okay.
it. Um, all right. So that's Sam Sacco's picture of the kind of galaxies as he saw it. Um, and this is the cover of the book that we made. Each of these images is a life-sized cyanotype self-portrait of one of the veterans who participated. In some cases, more than one veteran, as they wanted to demonstrate that they were, part of a loving relationship that helped nurture them back to health and presence. Nate Maybe is a Seneca Indian who's part of the Odyssey project and made this image. Sweetgrass is used to attract positive energy, sometimes burned after smudging to bring good energy after all the negative is pushed out. This particular braid of sweetgrass traveled with me to the sands of Iraq, always in my flak jacket, behind my sappy plate. When on a mission, I wanted to make sure I had as much positivity around me to keep my head straight. Um, that's Nate and a double exposure that he made. And double exposures became really a big part of the language of the Odyssey workshop and weren't initially part of my construction of the workshops, but Nate introduced them, as you can see, in these really powerful ways. And then others wanted to follow and make them. And Nate was very generous to lead the first lesson on that. This is an image that he made himself in silhouette with an IED detonation in the background. And Nate would title this differently not sure depending on what, but sometimes it was going back and sometimes it was titled Coming Home. And really kind of, I think, encapsulates the accordion kind of I think about time as an accordion where different moments are pressed close together and then they can be stretched out and exist kind of simultaneously, and that for me is something that Nate's image did really well. Um, this is an image that was made last week in a workshop by a participant named Natalie, who's working with a therapy dog. And she wrote about her dog, Hoosier, and the kind of partnership that they have and how Hoosier is helping her to navigate post-traumatic stress disorder. Um, this is Michael Shanley, um, and this is a self-portrait of him as a tanker in Iraq. Um, During the time that he was uh, driving a tank, he was also acknowledging in his own spiritual practice the coming and going of each day and celebrating his continuity of a life. And these pictures began for him. These are hundreds of sunsets and sunrises, and they began for him in Iraq and continued as a grounding practice through which he maintained his own inner peace when he came back to the States. And that's an image that Shanley made, putting down the gun and transitioning to his civilian life, which at that time was defined by um, athleticism and a community of people. So the ring that he's grabbing onto symbolizes his embrace of his future, and the rifle that he's letting go of is letting go of his past. This is Erica and her son. Eric also made this self-portrait and wrote, "I wanted to show the daily struggle of living with post-traumatic stress disorder. I wanted to make a picture that shows how I'm drowning in everyday life." There's another image of Jacob Wellstead, which is in the book that Tiffany and Ingrid created. After the turmoil of war, there's a difficulty in returning to the identity, family, and community we left, Rob Healy said. Peace photography to me represents a documentation and process of finding a way back to who we are now and getting to know and love that person. This is Rob with his son, Rob's son with his mother, and Rob's cyanotype with a mortar shell coming in and him holding or trying to hold his son up through his own memories of war and its presence in his life.
Brandon, I'm going to have to stop you there so we can hear from Jacques. I'm really sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you want to finish with a few words.
Yeah, I mean, 8 minutes is a short period of time, and I apologize for running over. But I just wanted to outline that in your book you outlined dialogue and connection, agency, visibility, imagination, and pluralism as aspects of peace photography and elements that make photography very useful in these types of contexts. And the images, the themes in the background of the images that I selected were meant to illustrate some of those components. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brendan. It's incredibly 8 minutes just can't do justice to this kind of work. So I appreciate you working within the limits, and yeah, just frustrating. Basically, we all need to get together, so we've got days to do this rather than just minutes. But I'm going to pass over to Jacques Nkinzingabo. He is born in Kigali and still lives there. And he's a self-taught photographer and visual storyteller specializing in documentary photography. His work focuses on cultural diversity, memories, migration, identity, and social issues. He is the co-founder of the Quinoa Art Foundation and the Kigali Center for Photography, where he displays the work of other Rwandan photographers, runs workshops, outreach work, and fosters the Rwandan photography community. I've had the great pleasure to be working with Jacques for a number of years now, and specifically we've been looking at his initiative, the Homestay Exhibitions, and how that works as a form of peace photography. I also want to mention that Jacques is also a music producer and DJ, only to emphasize how, a lot of, we're talking about photography today and thinking very much about the visual, but these are all kind of tied into how the arts as well all forms of art forms can create different forms of knowing and interacting with peace. So I'm going to hand over to Jacques and hopefully we'll have some time. I just want to say we've been having some problems with the chat. So we're now going to share a flurry of links and everything for everyone's things because hopefully it's now up and working. So thank you very much and over to you, Jacques.
Thank you. Hello again, my name is Jacques Nkinzingabo. I'm a photographer based in Rwanda. Yeah, I'm a founder of Kigali Center for Photography. I will start with my own work as a photographer, as an artist. The work you see on the screen it's called I'm a Survivor, which is a work that combines letters and the images that futures younger people were born 1994 and right after. For many of you might know the background of Rwanda in 1994. There was a genocide against Tutsis, and that's where my life started with searching myself too. I was born in 1994, a week before. So growing up young, not having a father, I was always wondering how it feels like to send a message to someone that you have lost. And I knew I shared this with so many people of my own generation, and this is what yeah, the project is all about. Fast forward because we don't have much time, as everyone said. Today I will talk much more, not only on this work, but on what we are doing as the center, and what are projects that we are doing towards working with the community. 1 second. One of them is, how can I share this again? Quick. Homestay. I will talk about homestay exhibitions. Again, it will lead back to why this matters in Rwanda. So, from the background that I shared with you, since 1994, majority of the people have lost trust, and as some of you might know, Rwanda has played a big role in reconciliation, where we even have reconciliation villages. The perpetrators are living with survivors together. But with the homestay exhibitions, it was also a contribution to add to our own community, where photography can play a role to bring people together with, to have a dialogues within the community on different types of conversation and issues around them. And it started as a collaboration from the workshops that I've been giving over the years in different parts of the country, working mainly with the younger people. And in this time, we realized that how can we contribute to reconciliation process in Rwanda by working with our own parents to open doors for our own neighbors as well, to showcase what we are able to do, and also involve them in what we are doing as a photographers, and show them that photography is not just images, but also it's a key and a tool for dialogues and the conversations that of issues or things that are around us, or things that we are not able to express ourselves. Yes. That's what Homestay Exhibitions is. It started in 2018 with a group of photographers from Nyavihu, and we were able to exhibit some of the work. Some of the work I will be sharing is one of the photographers, Richard. This project is on teen pregnancy, which was not so much discussed issue within the whole country. And when we got into this district, there was a large number of teen pregnancies. And Richard has been working on this topic. And having these women or young girls or younger moms having their stories in their homes, in their own neighborhood, and opening up on their own experiences, and also how they are seen within the same community. So it was such powerful experiences. Yeah, I think that's what I can do with my 8 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jacques. The whole limits of time is incredibly frustrating, because obviously this is a a big subject, and each of these projects deserve much more time in their own right. I hope that through the chat, people have been getting all the links, because there's been some issues with who's seeing what messages. And I wanted to go straight away. We have got not a lot of time. We might, if there are questions, run a bit over, but I appreciate that some people might need to go on the hour. But please, if anyone wants to come forward and put any messages into the chat, perhaps I could start with one. So many of you are talking in very different ways about how photography is being used to kind of foster cultures of peace in very different peace and conflict settings. You know, with Tatjana, we were seeing with PCRC's work really about photography being used as a way to kind of engage in, but across all of these, there's an element of engaging youth and engaging communities who might have been marginalized by war, or where the conversations as well are incredibly difficult because of the sensitivities and the harms and left by the legacies of conflict. I found those sunset images, Brendan, from one of your photographers, the way he spoke about taking pictures of the sunset as a kind of grounding practice. There's also a strong element that's coming through in a lot of these projects, really about the capacity of photography to support these kind of healing processes. I am not seeing the chat. I don't know, Matthew, if there are questions there. If not, could I perhaps ask Tatjana, maybe if you've got some thoughts, having seen the others' presentations, if you might be able to come forward with a few more thoughts on the different specificities, the different forms of peace photography that you're seeing in the different presentations?
Sure, and maybe I'll also try to. There was one question in the chat on sort of the ethical challenges, so I'll try to also address that. As we move forward. Before everything else, I mean, thank you very much to my co-panelists as well. The work they shared is really impressive, and it's a pleasure to share the stage, even if this is just this virtual stage. I one part of that stuck with me, I think, through all the narrative shared and photographs shared, and especially when we work with people that have went through different traumas, really how photography can be an amazing outlet for people to even confront their traumas head on, or find ways to mitigate it, to survive it easier, however, but also express it a bit better. We've in our work also done a lot of work with, for example, women survivors of sexual violence, and even just being able to stand in front of a camera and having your picture taken, being put in that context, was very traumatic for women, but also very empowering, because they are given this recognition and voice, and are able to stand proudly for a lot of them, for the first time ever, really stand proudly of what they've experienced in a way of what they've survived, and then now they can move forward. When it comes to ethical questions, I mean, there are many. I'll share one example. When we did this, especially this Ordinary Heroes project and the Love Tales one. So when we were talking about these courageous acts from the war and people who saved each other, and then the Love Tales as well, which is the interethnic relationships. A lot of the time, people didn't really understand why we want to bring these stories out, because for them, these were completely normal situations in their lives. Especially for Ordinary Heroes, I mean, for people, it was like, of course, I'm going to save somebody's life, and I'm not going to care where they're coming from, and I'm not going to care about anything. It was a terrible situation, and all we wanted to do was help. But in, unfortunately, several circumstances of those where we did go with publishing these stories, for example, in one story later, the person dealt with a lot of pressure from their community, because they were a Muslim man who spoke good about a Serb who saved him in this specific situation. He unfortunately had threats, went through a lot of threats, and so there's especially these when it comes to tackling these issues of war crimes, genocide, to be especially careful on how we do it. I mean, we went through the whole process with him. We made sure there's security. We made sure like all of these things, of course, but it still happens. And then when it happens, you're like, okay, was this worth it? Thankfully for the person and for his family, it still was, and we made sure that it still is. Otherwise we would have just took everything away. But so yeah, this is just one of the examples, but I'll leave more to colleagues to address as well. And thank you all so much again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Tatjana. You bring up something about this kind of complexity of experience that is captured often in a lot of these projects. We saw that a lot, Brendan, in some of the images that came from the veterans, this kind of holding of the trauma of conflict alongside for a hope for a new future and building something different. There's much thinking about how maybe what a photography of peace is it's got a kind of future oriented perspective as well as a past looking one. I wonder if you could maybe speak to something about those kind of complexities and maybe this question of ethics as well. I'm appreciating we're going a few minutes over time, so if people have to leave, of course, we will aim to finish up in the next 5-10 minutes. I know Jacques has already had to go.
I'm going to wrap in a question from the chat too that was, will peace photography be will it become a genre that's recognized? And I think that that's an interesting question. There's also a few questions in the chat about definitions. And I like to think about definitions in the context of all of this complexity as an invitation to consider more deeply one of the aspects of that complexity. Um, there are many aspects of complexity that I discovered working with veterans. I'm not a veteran myself, but what I learned was, you have young people who sign up and actually volunteer to go to war, as opposed to many people whose work is featured in these other projects whose lives were defined as the consequence of a war that they didn't volunteer for. Um, so intellectually, I could appreciate peace photography as a reaction from a refugee, as a reaction from a civilian. But what amazed me, Tiffany, was when you asked to feature Odyssey, I put out the invitation to the veterans, and so many of them came back identifying what they were doing as peace photography, or identified the role of photography in their search for peace, or identified photography as a component of their will to actually bring peace to themselves, to other veterans, to their family, and to their surrounding communities. So I think the impact of all of these programs is first on a core group of individuals who participate, and I think that that's probably common to what Tatjana said, what Jacques said, what Yassim said. And I think from that core group where people can share things safely with one another, they then involve their families, their friends, their communities. The camera is always an invitation to participate and always an opportunity to affirm what it is that you're seeing or trying to say. And there are always these beautiful concentric circles of impact that come from any type of participatory project that I think engender, first an engagement, which is healing to anybody. We need to meet other people where they are, meet ourselves where we are, and then communicate about that. And those concentric circles of impact then extend to family, to friends, to community, and through venues like exhibitions, newspaper publications, those beautiful magazines that I'm going to be ordering later. Um, we extend that search for peace, that search for acceptance, that search for identifying ourselves in the story very broadly. And I think when the world, quote unquote, the world or the larger communities witness the work that people are doing through photography, it's an incredible affirmation and boost for anybody who's done that work. So yeah, I mean, I think there's so much complexity, but I think the basic elements are, inviting people in to express themselves and inviting people to listen. And at our core, as a social species, we need that. So
Another one of the partners that we work with, when he talks about this kind of process, this exactly as you're talking, Brendan, this process of photography and how that can build connection and dialogue. And then at the end, we have a beautiful photo as well. And it's this idea of there's a process in sharing that happens with photography, but the images themselves can travel beyond, as you say, talking about this kind of ripple effect. I think we'll take one more question and then we'll finish off because I'm aware it's a Friday afternoon. These conversations are ongoing part of the research. I really hope to be able to create more events. There's the book, there's the website. So while it's very frustrating having such a restricted space to have a proper conversation about this, we very much hope to be able to keep this going. But we've got a long question here. What are the proactive and adaptive strategies that are crucial for project organizers to implement to prevent peace photography projects from being inadvertently co-opted, instrumentalized, or strategically misused by external actors, such as political factions, propagandists, or even well-meaning but agenda-driven organizations, in ways that could end up perpetuating division or undermining genuine peace-building efforts? I don't know if Tatjana, you would want to try and tackle that one.
Sure, and I feel bad that the rest of the colleagues left. We seem to have co-opted the space now, but okay. It happens. I mean, yeah, a few examples from our work. I mean, even though Bosnia is a bit of a specific example, was always we in every project that we do, we make sure that there are voices from the different ethnic groups, including minority groups and religious groups. And when you really put them together like that, chances of them being misused are very low. We did not have situations like that so far, just because when it's out there in the open, supported by factual information, when we do projects that are more related to war crimes or genocide, and we'll take judicial facts as a background to it all, juxtaposition it with the photos and the narratives, to make sure that nothing can really be manipulated again, even or if somebody would even try, it would not stand. Another thing is, and that again will depend on your circumstances, and we all know that funding is a big issue for any, especially independent artists, or media makers, or however, is trying to, when you're sourcing for any sort of funding, doing as much as you can your own due diligence into the organizations that might fund your work in the end, seeing how they work. Because we know, for example, in Bosnia, we don't take any government money from our government or governments in the region, due to this actual fear that inevitably we'll get pushed into one narrative or the other. That's a very politicized and for us very nationalistic narrative. So again, that comes with the fact that we don't take a lot of some of these funds that might be available, that might be great, or provide us with a lot of funding that might help us boost our reach a lot. But we're sort of aware of this and go for lesser, more secure, more independent funding, so that when you're doing these types of stories, you can really curate them the best way and then you can bring in all the different types of perspectives and they can coexist better.
I think that's probably a really important message to kind of end on there. So we'll start to wind up, but this idea of peace photography isn't a given. And what we're seeing in a lot of the projects that we've collaborated with through the imaging peace research is this kind of very careful and intentional kind of ethics of care that's going on and being put into realizing these projects, whether they're working in a much more intimate therapeutic space like Brandon is, or in a much more broader youth community engaged space in much more public forums like Tatjana is. or in the context of the Rohingyatographer, there's a whole network of photographers that they're working with. But in all of these, and the same with Jacques in Rwanda, in all these very different contexts, these practitioners have a very not just careful, but deep a sense of knowledge in terms of what the peace and conflict setting or context is in their very specific locations. And in that sense, they can adapt and use photography in very specific and targeted ways to ensure or to mitigate against the danger of, as you say, peace photography being co-opted or potentially used for other ends. So I'm going to finish up there and say a huge thank you to all of the panelists. So any people who want to stay in touch, there's the imaging piece, Instagram, there's websites, there's the imaging, there's the peace photography guide, which can be downloaded. There's lots of information there on ethical practice. Later this year, there'll also be an academic monograph coming out. There's a wonderful podcast coming out too on a project soon. So there's plenty of other information and bits out there. I urge everyone to go and have a look at the websites of all the panelists that have presented today. Honestly, the work is very compelling, and it gives us lots of different models and versions of what peace photography looks like. And as we start to all work towards kind of building a sense of what this emerging genre might be, in the end, it is a plural form. It's a plural way of using photography, but a very kind of intentional one. And I hope it's something that the panel has really been a provocation to people to think, to give it some more thought and exploration. But do carry on following our work, and I would like to finish with saying a huge thank you to everyone for giving up their time and giving up their attention today. Many thanks.